So I've seen a lot of YouTube videos, well, a lot. I've seen a few YouTube videos appear about people mentioning that they don't have any real friends and that they're basically alone and feeling lonely at certain ages. Say, like, I saw one that was a guy who was 46, another 52. And it makes me wonder, is it harder nowadays to make friends and to keep friends than it used to be? Or is this something that often happens with age? I'm currently 36 myself, and my background is I grew up in Belgium. I lived there until I was 20 years old when I graduated. Then I left to Malta. I lived there for a year and a half. I then moved to Mexico, primarily lived in Cancun for about 12 years. And then finally I ended up in Dubai, and I spent my summers in Europe, often in Belgium to see my family. So I never had issues in terms of friend groups when I was in Belgium. Of course, when you're young, it's rather easy, you're going to school, you're seeing people all day. I think you're more easily oversaturated with social contact than anything else. We used to go out often on the weekends. I was doing gymnastics also. Not that I saw that group of people outside of sports, but plenty of social contact. I think when you're young, generally, or at least it used to be easy. Like, I'm curious about people nowadays if they feel it's harder. I noticed with my son, who's 10 years old, that he has a bit more difficulties sometimes, even though he does, he goes to school, he has a few friends there. Finally, it took him a while to make friends and to actually feel integrated. But now he has some friends and he doesn't want to change school anymore as he used to do. But in his sports clubs, I haven't really noticed him feeling very integrated or connected with the other kids. I moved to Malta when I was 20 years old, right after graduating in Belgium. And my brother was also living in Malta at the time. That was one of the reasons that I chose it. They have English as a language, which made things a bit easier. My brother lived there. It's still Europe. They have an attractive climate. So I moved there, and I didn't really know much about the place I was moving to, in the sense that I moved to a town called Melilla, which is where a lot of expats come in the summer. Well, expats, a lot of tourism, really. It's more of a tourist town, and also they have national tourism, in the sense that some people even move from Valletta up to the north of the island, even though it's only about, I can't recall if it's 30 kilometers across or north to south. It's a tiny island nonetheless. And for some reason, people will actually move from the main city to their summer residence just, less than an hour's drive away. So that's one of the times that I felt the most lonely, because the town is pretty empty in the summer. First of all, there's not much going on. Most of the people living there, there wasn't really anyone my age that I came across or that I met, largely because most of the schools are closer to the capital. I ended up making one really good friend who by now has passed away. He was about 20 years older than I was, but we connected because we both played squash, and I guess he felt a little bit lonely. Maybe he was divorced, and I guess he felt a lot younger than his age. So we hit it off. We were good friends there. But I didn't end up staying in Malta for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's very small. Second of all, there is a bit of a language barrier, in the sense that if you don't speak Maltese, then you feel like people around you, the locals, kind of have to adjust. Like everybody there speaks perfect English, but when they're amongst each other, they speak the Maltese, which is kind of like Arabic, yet only 500,000 people in the world speak this language, so it's not really worth learning a language that is that difficult for such a small demographic. Also, after a while, you might feel a little bit claustrophobic living in Malta because you can't really go anywhere by car. You have to take a boat or a plane to get off of the island. It didn't help in Malta that I was self-employed, so I basically worked online. I didn't have anywhere I would go regularly and meet people that way. Eventually, I found a sports club, although getting around at first was a little bit problematic. I didn't have a car at first. I later on got a motorcycle, which made things a bit easier. And through my brother, he left, I believe it was after about like 9 or 10 months that I lived on the island, and he wasn't really as available, or I perhaps didn't take the initiative as much either as I could have. But I also felt like I wanted to know locals, I wanted to meet people that were from there. But since they all generally have their friend groups pretty established, I found it difficult in Malta to really establish a close-knit group of friends. Something that helped me a lot and that I wish I had discovered earlier in Malta, because I was supposed to have a friend move there with me, which is the reason that I rented a 3-bedroom house, like a large place, because he said he wanted a good amount of space, and we were going to be roommates. But then he kind of got cold feet and canceled on me. I think the experience would have likely been very different had we moved there together, as opposed to me by myself. On the one hand, it did help me in the sense that I was very focused on work, and I was very focused on going to the gym and learning about nutrition. I gained about 10 kilograms of muscle in that year that I moved to Malta, because all I was doing is working, training, learning about how to eat right, sleeping. I only went to Pacheville a few times, like to go out, but yeah, it wasn't really, since I didn't have friend groups that would go there, it wasn't a frequent occurrence. After my time in Malta, I was traveling around a little bit. I went to Thailand, I went to Malaysia. I was exploring a few places, and my idea next was to move to the United States, which always had a certain type of calling. Like I was always intrigued about possibly living there. And I did some couch surfing in the US, namely in New York. I was in New York for about a week, and it was really hard to get a host there because it's a very popular and expensive place. And then I went to Austin because I knew somebody there, and I sent like 10 requests on couchsurfing also. And to my surprise, I was hoping that at least one would accept, and to my surprise, most of them accepted. So I ended up moving around from couch to couch for about 3 weeks in Austin. I got to know a lot of places, a lot of people. And it was in Austin that they recommended I should move to Mexico. So I came to Cancun because they had inexpensive flights there, with the idea of traveling back, across Mexico and then up to California. But I ended up liking it a lot in Cancun. One of the reasons being that it was so easy to meet people, and everything's very informal. I could rent a room there in an apartment with no commitment for duration. I just pay month by month. Whereas in Belgium, generally, if you want to rent something, it's generally like a 3-year minimum commitment. And a lot of people move to Cancun from basically everywhere. You have a lot of Europeans. I ended up being roommates with a girl from Germany and a guy from some other city in Mexico, for instance. Um, yeah, I loved it there. I got to know, when I was living there, I got to know one of my still current best friends. And I built up a circle of friends, and I started doing modeling, which also helped getting to meet people, integrating in. It's a relatively small scene, the modeling scene there, so you would see the same people over and over, which of course helps when it comes to establishing friendships. And yeah, in the gymnastics club, I also had a few friends that I would then, go to cenotes with, and we do like flips everywhere, go to the beach, put like one of those buoys in the sand and flip on those. So I loved my time there. But after a number of years, when I had my son is when, of course, I wouldn't have as much time to dedicate to friendships. Also growing older and not doing as much crazy stuff in general. You don't want to go out as much to nightclubs. You want to spend a bit more time on your career and on your family, especially if you have children. So in Mexico, I had this pretty close-knit group of friends, but then that's one of the issues of living in a place where a lot of people come and go, such as Cancun, where I lived for quite a while. A lot of people come there, so it's easy to make new friends, but it's also easy to lose them because, people come there, they live there a couple of years, they make some money, and then often they move on. It's the people that are very easily mobile, that'll, after, say 5 to 10 years, very often they'll go and find greener pastures or something new. I kind of did the same, and that's one of the main reasons for a certain group of people, the ones that, tend to search out new places and new experiences. You have to start your friend group basically from scratch wherever you arrive, and I believe that as you grow older, sometimes it becomes harder to get the same depth of connection, since you do have less time generally to spend, less leisure time generally, as a general rule, not talking about everyone. But so yeah, for me personally, when I left Mexico and I came to Belgium, I found it very difficult because the friends that I had in Belgium, they're living much further away. They're at about 45 minutes to an hour driving, and I'm not a fan of driving. And in Belgium also, I feel like generally people tend to plan things way ahead of time. So you kind of, if you want to meet up with a friend, you almost have to plan it like a week or two beforehand to make sure that they don't have other plans already. Whereas in Mexico, often it's like last minute, like, hey, doing anything, let's hang out, or people even just, the old-fashioned ones at least might even just show up. That's not very common anymore. It can be a hassle, but problematic. But it does make it more difficult, of course, to actually, it adds another step, if for a restaurant, for instance, if you can just walk in there, it's more easily going to happen than when you have to make a reservation, and by the time you want to go, it might not be possible. So yeah, I had a very difficult time adjusting in Belgium, and I couldn't find a sports group. For instance, there is gymnastics and trampoline in the town that I was spending most of my time in, but if you're not going to be there all year long, first of all, it's more difficult, and then secondly, they didn't have any groups my age basically for like trampoline or gymnastics. It's the oldest age group bracket was like 13-14 years old. So yeah, that wasn't the best match. So yeah, that kind of excluded in Belgium the option of getting, I could try to find another sport, but you kind of want to do the ones you're most passionate about, right? Not only look for a sport that's age appropriate. So when I went to Dubai for the first time and joined the CrossFit gym, I was really pleasantly surprised about the fact that they had this community already and they welcomed me with like open arms. So that was a big motivating factor for me to kind of set up some roots in Dubai. Of course, the problem there is that staying in Dubai all year long is kind of difficult in the summer months. It gets, June, it starts getting around like 40 to 42 degrees Celsius. Goes up to like 50 in July and August, and the humidity also picks up a lot. So, yeah, I would say mobility, like ease of moving to new places, is one of the major factors nowadays that complicates having close friendships, because you do notice, of course, I divide my time between Dubai and Europe, and it makes it a lot more difficult because people can't rely on you being there all the time. If they're gonna pick up the phone and call someone to like hang out, they might not have you at the top of their head because maybe you're not around, right? So it's not an ingrained habit for them. A second reason, which may seem counterintuitive, I would say, is technology. It's very easy to send someone a message, and funnily enough, it's somewhat more difficult perhaps to meet up in person and have these like actual, close connections, because you kind of feel like you already, it might be just more convenient to be like chatting using messages, and you don't feel the need to meet up as much because of that. But it does, it's not the same type of interaction. In the end, chatting with someone for half an hour or an hour, and you might be, getting distracted and doing other things in the meantime sometimes. I mean, it does help, of course, with people that you cannot meet up with physically, people that are far away. But I would much rather be in the same room with someone than having a video chat with them, of course. The Mexico chapter ended when I was about 33 years old, in part because I realized that I wanted to be closer to family, direct family again, and having that time difference of 8 hours or so between Belgium and Cancun was a bit difficult in that sense to make the trip, as it gets harder as you get older to adjust to the time zone differences. And I guess I didn't want to get stuck in one place. After about 10 years, it started dawning on me that if I didn't move then, I would probably never move again. And I didn't want my son to grow up in a place where corruption is so rampant. I didn't want him to think it's normal. So what are some practical tips to get to know new people, to make new friends? One might be, if you live in a at least somewhat visited area, you could check out Couchsurfing, which is couchsurfing.com, where you're able to host people that are traveling. Now, I know that this usually implies people come and go. It's usually tourists that are in the city only a short amount of time. But on the upside, the momentum that you're going to get from getting to know people and not being on your own and having something planned where you don't have to try and find someone to do an activity the same day, it's going to help you get out and about, and it's easier to meet other people when you're already with somebody, and especially if that's somebody new, and you're gonna usually do new things, you're gonna get out of your comfort zone a little bit. So yeah, if you do live in a city, say, where it is possible to do couchsurfing, then I would recommend that as an option. Another option would be to join either a sports association or sign up for some kind of course, it's very helpful for men to have an activity to bond over, and usually it's not as with women as often where you just meet people for the sake of meeting them. Usually for men, it's more common to say like, okay, we're gonna watch a game, or we're gonna learn a skill, or build something, or help somebody move, those types of things. Additionally, you make the closest friends sometimes when you have a sense of shared accomplishment. So if you have any type of interest that you haven't done a course for, one of the examples that I have in the back of my mind, which I haven't gotten around to, is doing a Wim Hof method breathing course, for instance. It could be yoga, it could be a meditation group, it could be any kind of skill. If you want to learn to cook, join a cooking, workshop. Those types of experiences, the good thing is also that you have generally the same group of people coming back for a certain duration of time. So it can be a bit more easy than when you see people only like once a week. For instance, with certain sports, you might only see them sometimes, and it might be like a flux of people. Like if you're at a gym, it'd be very hard to run into the exact same people unless it's a tiny one and there's like, gym rats. But in general, another practical way of making new friends is to get a tattoo that says, "Do you want to be my BFF?" It's a natural talking point for people to reach out to you, because they'll think you're kind of a desperate loser and they feel sorry for you. That's skip that one. Basically, anything that'll get you out of the house and in situations where it's easier to run into new people is generally positive to be able to meet new friends. I tend to enjoy being productive, so if I can find a way to make money also, or practice a new skill or something like that while being exposing myself to such opportunities, all the better. So to give you a practical example, again, for this to work, you might have to be in a place where it's feasible to do so. But when I was living in Cancun, for instance, I would create Airbnb experiences based on my primary interests. One of them was going to cenotes. I would have a cenote experience where I'd take between, say, 3 to 10 people that sign up for the experience, take them to a cenote by Port Morelos, and I could do my usual flips and tell them about the history of the cenotes and show them around. And generally there would be more people present that also enjoy visiting the cenotes that are more local. You can strike up a conversation with them, see if they might be people that you want to stay in touch with. It would also help in the sense that it would help me maintain my own friendships that were already established by cutting them in. Instead of renting a van, sometimes I would say, okay, why don't we go in 2 or 3 cars? Because it's easier to talk in smaller groups, for instance, and the cost was about the same anyway. And I figured I could divide the profits that we got from showing people around between all of us. And just more fun with some people that you already know, with some established friends. So another one I did was a little bit easier to put into practice, perhaps. It was talking about, I would do meetups at a restaurant and offer to share my experience when it comes to business. If you have any expertise in any specific field, you could, create these types of meetups as an Airbnb experience. And I did a third one, which was a bit more niche, so not as successful, although I had a few people sign up for it, which was slacklining. And it's not as if I'm an expert in any sense of the word. I just knew the basics, and I knew that there's people who might travel somewhere, they don't have the equipment themselves, and if they see an experience where this is provided and it's not a lot more, it's not very expensive anyway for them, it might also be nice to meet a local and get to talk about um, how it is to live in a certain place. And so yeah, there's tons of potential ideas that could work for you if you put some thought into it. Another good way of making friends apparently is to get a dog, preferably one that'll hump all of the other dogs it finds in the park. Roll clip.
The 3 most recent friends I've made have been at a dog park. So I do have a dog. I go to this dog park every single day. And funny enough, my dog likes to hump every other dog at the dog park. And then I have to go up to their owner and apologize. And that has made me a lot of friends.
So yeah, this is indeed a good way, you know, getting a dog. It's not the best reason to get a dog. Like, don't get a dog if that's the only reason you want a dog. Or do. Depends how much you want new friends, I guess. As long as you take care of it, you know, don't get it and then dump it in a pound. But yeah, dogs can be very good reasons to get, or ways to get talking to people, to strangers. And it's a good way to get out of the house in general. Another idea might be to get a tattoo. You know, it's a bit radical, but think about it. If you get one that shows people what you're interested in, it gives them an easy point of reference to talk to you. Like, I don't personally have any tattoos, but if I were to get one, I would definitely get one that kind of reflects my personality and maybe gives people a talking point, you know, something that they could say like, oh, you're into this or into that, but there's currently nothing that I feel strongly enough about. Definitely wouldn't recommend getting your family member's face or anything tattooed on there either. Those usually look pretty horrible. So just to summarize, if you want to make new friends, what you could do is leave the house more often. You know, don't always order in, go someplace. If you want to pretend like you're on a business trip, it feels less awkward that way to go ahead and have dinner by yourself or something, or lunch. Do that, you know. It's not the best way, in my opinion, to meet people. I would suggest going for a course, learning a new skill, signing up for a workshop, or if you want to be productive at the same time, instead of spending money, you want to make money, do Airbnb experiences, or Airbnb, rent out a room, or couchsurfing if you don't have a space that would perform well on Airbnb itself, or you don't want the formality or the hassle that comes with it, or it's not regulated in your city. You know, you can still do couchsurfing, provided usually there's at least a minimum number of tourists that visit your city. So those are my recommendations when it comes to making friends, which to some people, me included, comes easier sometimes than keeping friends. For that, I'll make a new video, so subscribe to the channel if you want to see that when it's done. And yeah, thank you for watching this longer than planned video, and see you around.